Regular view.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Sam, and I'm going to teach you guys a little bit about Earthship homes today. Okay, so a little bit of history. This building method was invented by an architect named Michael Reynolds in the 70s. He graduated from architecture school in 1969 and was really inspired by the issue of global waste and the debate over what to do with it. And keep in mind, at this time, recycling programs didn't exist. So he was just, kind of a trailblazer on that front of trying to figure out what to do with waste. So this leads to him kind of trying to think of ways to use garbage to build structures. And thus the beer can brick was created. And here's a little picture of the beer can brick in action up top here. And then a couple pictures of Michael Reynolds. The one on the left is him in the 70s, and then the one on the right is him a little bit closer to today. He ended up buying some land in Taos, New Mexico, with some of his friends, and they just kind of began to experiment with various building methods and eventually became recognized for their homes made of garbage. And then over time, their building methods have evolved quite a bit. And then eventually he started a company called Earthship Biotexture. In the early days, Earthships were really, really simple. They had three main principles. The homes would utilize recycled materials, garbage, and local materials whenever possible. The Earthships would generate their own needs independent from the grid, and it would be feasible for anyone without specialized construction knowledge to build for themselves. And that's really the biggest point there, is that they wanted this to be something that could be accomplished by really anybody without having to use heavy machinery and really just your own two hands and some garbage that you've collected. So here are some of the early experimental designs. On the top right here, you can see a diagram of the beer can brick. That was kind of built with a couple of cans that were still intact and a couple of cans that had been smashed, and they were all wired together. And then just kind of like placed on top of each other with some mortar in between or some adobe mud or something like that. And then over here on the left is one of their earliest kind of like dwelling structures. A lot of them in the early days had this dome top, and they were all mostly made out of cans that were parallel to the ground, so horizontal. Yeah, there's a smokestack for ventilation for a hearth or a fireplace, along with recycled doors and windows on there. But they're all, at that time, were built really, really simply without very many amenities whatsoever. And here's some more early photos. All the way on the right, you can kind of see, this is, I think, one of the first designs where they started using glass bottles. And you can see that they're kind of like the necks of the bottles are sticking out a little bit. And this is kind of before they had refined that structure a little more. And then the presence of the child in the photo just kind of shows how the land that they bought out in New Mexico became somewhat of like a communal living space. So there were a lot of families out there that were building their own homes for themselves. And I guess the whole point was to be a community of self-sufficient people, kind of free from the typical constraints of, American life. On the bottom left here is an example of how they started using aluminum cans separated from the beer can bricks. They pretty early on abandoned the beer can brick, kind of noticing that if they were to just use cans and mortar by themselves, they got a little more freedom with structures that they're able to build, and you can get a little more artistic with it too. And the photo in the middle is a good example of how they start to get a little more creative over time with how they're using cans and bottles and such to create, aesthetically pleasing structures. And then on the top left over there is an early floor plan design in which kind of some of the dome dwellings are connected to a larger communal living space. And you can kind of see they've got this area right here in the front where they're trying to grow a garden and everything. So they're starting to use passive solar design. And then there are some tubes coming off the bottom, or coming off the back, I should say, of these dwellings to kind of give a little bit of ventilation. So on the top left is another dome style home that was built by Reynolds and his crew. This particular photo kind of shows how the construction mainly takes place with just manual labor. and they've kind of built this scaffolding for themselves to get up on the top, and it's mostly just offset by buckets of mortar and logs and stuff like that to get up there to finish the dome. On the bottom, you can see where the buildings start to get a little more sophisticated. Specifically on the bottom right, they start to include some framing along with beer cans and mortar and adobe mud and all that. Just, you know, giving more freedom of motion and everything. And then the two photos on the bottom left and the top right show the first two homes that were built to incorporate all of the knowledge that they had learned over time, just building these structures and experimenting with different things. So these are the first two houses that include passive solar, water catchment. They hand built, you can see up on the top here, right by the rainbow, and then on the top of this bottom left house down here, they've built their own wind turbines to generate electricity. So yeah, they talk a lot about freedom and how Earthships are meant to free the individuals that live in them kind of from having to, you know, pay utility bills and stuff like that. And there is a documentary about Michael Reynolds and his Earthship building method. It's called Garbage Warrior. He speaks briefly about how when you wake up in the morning and you don't have any utility bills to pay for your home, that kind of provides you with all of your own needs. Your day is free to do whatever it is that you want, kind of to enrich your life. And they also speak to another architect in this movie that lives on the property with his young family. And he talks about how his children know that their home takes care of them, like they take care of it. And it gives them drinking water, it gives them their heat, all of that. And she doesn't know any other way for a house to be. And I kind of thought that was cool. So over time, the building methods evolve quite a bit. They learn a lot, they adjust and kind of adapt all of their building methods to be able to use what works and kind of get rid of the ideas that didn't work. So an example of this is a 2-story Earthship that they tried to build with angled passive solar windows on both stories. And this ended up being way too much solar gain. The house was incredibly hot all of the time and way, way, way overly hot in the summertime. So they kind of ditched that idea and stayed more to 1-story houses after that. And the list of principles kind of evolves to include thermal and solar heating and cooling methods, passive solar gains, thermal mass, solar and wind electricity generation, water harvesting and repurposing, contained sewage treatment for each of the homes, and then food production within each Earthship as well. And we'll get into a little more specifics about all of this in a moment. So basic Earthship construction. In more modern Earthships, the beer can bricks and the aluminum can building methods have pretty much been abandoned in favor for methods that provide more insulation, more strength, and more ventilation. So this brings us to the use of rammed earth tire walls, which are typically built in U shapes, as you can see up here in this top photo, because it's kind of hard to get a right angle corner with a bunch of tires. So they kind of learned that tires are one of the most commonly discarded items and are typically dumped into like tire pits, and those pose a lot of health risks to the environment and people that live near them. So they come up with the rammed earth tire system. So basically what you do is you dig out an area by a hill so you can get your earth berm over the back, and you lay out recycled tires in the footprint of what you want your home to look like. And you fill these tires with dirt that comes from the back, you know, all of your recycled dirt that you've dug out for your home. And you pound it into the tires with sledgehammers. And most of the construction of these homes takes place with sledgehammers. You do a lot of the digging yourself with the sledgehammer, et cetera. So because these tires can become so heavy, about 300 pounds a piece, you typically are ramming the earth in place. So you'll do one course of tires, you'll fill in the dirt behind the tire wall, and then you'll lay another course of tires over top and start to ram the earth in those, and so on and so on. There's typically not any heavy machinery around when building, so that's another reason that the tires are rammed in place. They're near impossible to move just with a couple of people. And the south-facing greenhouse walls are also outfitted with skylights and hatch windows to allow for opening and closing based on the indoor temperature needs to allow for ventilation. Most of the south-facing windows also have shades that you can pull down if it's getting a little too hot in there. Most Earthships have photovoltaic systems and wind electricity systems that are placed on the roof or on the earth berm behind the home, and they're typically connected to battery storage inside the home for electricity use. Rainwater is collected in cisterns to be circulated throughout the home. Earthships use water 4 times. So after the water is collected, it's moved through a filter, and then it comes out as clean water into your sinks, your washing machine if you have one, through your shower heads. And then the gray water from all of that is filtered again and sent through grease traps if it's coming from the kitchen. And then that's circulated through the greenhouse soil. And then the runoff from the greenhouse soil in your home is then filtered again and sent to fill toilets, things like that. And then your black water is sent through a contained sewage treatment, which is mostly like bacteria based. And then that is dispersed outside of your home into either just the ground if you don't have any vegetation out there, but you can also have yourself a nice garden outside. They don't recommend that you feed like plants that you're going to eat with your sewage, but if you just have like some trees and shrubs and stuff outside, that'll be fine to use. So rammed earth tire walls are strong enough to be load bearing, and they don't require the construction of a traditional foundation, which is a huge advantage to building with tires. So the top left photo here kind of shows how the earth is filled in behind the courses of tires as you go. And then the top right photo is a good example of the earth wall tires being rammed by hand with sledgehammers. And you can see there's a lot of people in that photo. Usually construction of these takes a lot of folks that are willing to help you out. The bottom left photo is a nice diagram showing how the Earthship is built into the hillside, and then typically wood decking is placed on top of the tire walls to be able to get your berm going over the top of the roof. And then the bottom right photo shows how the rammed earth tire wall in the back here, you can kind of stick frame on top of it to get your angled windows in here on the front for your greenhouse, etc. So on the left, you can kind of see how some Earthships are also equipped with runoff water collection systems independent from the water collection cisterns that you're going to be using inside your home. They usually have a lot of really creative ways to divert water to mitigate any, moisture issues. Typically, your water cisterns are also going to be buried inside the berm, and that'll also help with keeping thermal mass back there. On the top right here, here's another quick diagram of the water flow through an Earthship. So you can see it's cached on the roof up here. It goes through the cistern. There's a water organizing module that'll send it to bathing, showering, washing dishes. Then that'll be sent through your interior botanical cell, then sent through your flush toilet, and then sent through your exterior botanical cells. And then the bottom right here is a picture of some of the water pumps inside the Earthship that are required for pumping from the collection cistern throughout the home. And here are some good examples of the greenhouse space that are built into Earthships. Typically, those are on the south-facing windows, and they're kind of built parallel to, to the rest of the home. The more successful temperature regulating Earthships that have this greenhouse built parallel to the rest of the living quarters, and they're kind of separated from the rest of the living quarters by a second adobe mud wall and also a second set of glazing. So because it gets so hot in here, it can get, I think, up to 10 degrees warmer in the greenhouse than it can in the rest of the home. You're going to want to have another barrier between the greenhouse space and your living space so it's not getting overly hot. And you can also see some hatches up here and some rope pulls that can be used to open up the skylights to allow for some more ventilation through the space. And one of the best insulators is still air. So this makes use of that to be able to heat the rest of your home in the summer or in the wintertime. And then the earthen walls on the inside also store thermal mass to radiate to the rest of the home. And here is a nice example of just kind of like a diagram of a modern Earthship. So this is another good thing to show the ongoing convection current that is flowing throughout a properly performing Earthship, because they have these earth tubes that go through the bermed wall behind out into the open air behind the home. So warm air is drawn into the home through these earth tubes, and they typically have hatches on the inside, so you can open or close them based on your needs. So when the warm air moves through the earth berm behind your home, it's cooled by the thermal mass temperature within the earth, and then it's dispersed through your home. And as the air is warmed, it kind of rises, goes through these hatches that are right here between like your second set of glazing and your second earthen wall, moves through the greenhouse and then up through the hatches up on top of the greenhouse to let warm air out. You can see your water cistern right here that's buried within the earth berm. You can see your tire wall here that's also helping to hold thermal mass. And then your summer sun coming down onto the angled glazing of the greenhouse area. Yeah, this earth tube concept is really, really awesome. It helps keep the inside temperature of the Earthship at a constant. I think they keep it at like 68 to 72 degrees or something like that, which is super cool. Okay, so here's some legal issues that Mike Reynolds and his team have run into. So as I was saying earlier, the Earthship kind of commune was really just a group of people who are building themselves homes out of whatever they could find on the land that they owned or purchased building rights from. Some people were able to secure plots of land from Mike Reynolds for less than $3,000 and build their homes, just out of recycled materials and manual labor, costing them almost nothing. A lot of people had originally just come to the land and pitched tents and made themselves little campsites and were kind of building their Earthship homes around their tents. So their structure is kind of, evolving as they go and providing them with more shelter as they go. So previously, Taos County had kind of been working amicably with Mike Reynolds and his team and the group that lived there. Somebody in the permits office was really kind of sympathetic to their cause and everything and was really helping them out with obtaining permits. I think they kind of almost had a little bit of a don't ask, don't tell policy going on for a while too. But eventually the head of the building permits office in Taos, I think he either passed away or retired. And there was a kind of resulting power shift in the building that kind of came down hard on Reynolds and his team and the people that lived on the property. So as the power in the permits office shifts, visits are made to the property by the county and stop work orders are issued for all construction that they have going on the land. Mike Reynolds is kind of evaluated by the county as if he had built numerous illegal subdivisions as a major land developer. Instead of just kind of selling plots of land to people and letting them haul whatever they want there and building their own homes. And kind of just to reiterate, most of these people are living in tents and just trying to build themselves permanent shelter. So most of them continued on with their work despite stop work orders being issued. And all of this results in Mike Reynolds losing his accreditations and his architect's license. And here is a quick quote that I'd like to share from him. In a state that has designated several thousand acres for testing weapons of destruction to humanity, can't we allow 650 acres to be allowed for testing methods of human survival? I'll go to jail for that. I'll die for that. And here are some photos of pretty much bomb testing sites in New Mexico. So following all of this, losing his architect's license and everything, he kind of stops building for a while and focuses all of his energy on getting, trying to at least get a bill passed in New Mexico to sanction his land as a sustainable development testing site. So his bill, he spends a while working on this. Eventually it gets filibustered by the New Mexico state government. He does his best to continue on with his plans, but kind of play by the permit office's rules. So this forces his really, really, really out of the box ideas and solutions into kind of like a more neatly packaged, like socially acceptable and legal way of building homes. So I think this is where a lot of critiques of the Earthship Biotexture Company and the Earthship building method comes from. He, goes on to kind of try to build a few subdivisions that kind of have like a standardized blueprint and floor plan. So a couple of houses are built the same way. And this ultimately it kind of fails because this is not really a cookie cutter kind of building method. It requires very site specific considerations. And it just, it kind of drew in a lot of people that maybe weren't well fit for this kind of style of living, I guess. Most of this is still really experimental. They're kind of working as they go, and they find stuff out and they change the way they're building and all that. But so not everything in these Earthships that he built for the general public kind of end up working the way that they should, or the way that people that lived in them thought they should. So here, costs from Earthship Biotexture. If you want to build an Earthship and have his company build it for you, you're going to pay about $225 per square foot. For reference, the average home in the United States costs between 100 and 150 $100 to $150 per square foot. So you can see, you're going to pay quite a bit more. And then to have maintenance done by the company itself is expensive. You can't really just call out like a traditional plumber to this house. So you're typically, if something's going wrong, you're going to have to call the company itself. And they charge $150 per half hour to have someone evaluate your home. So that can rack up really quick too. And here are a couple of photos of some Earthship Biotexture houses today. You can see they've become a little more grand. And here's a couple more. They've kind of moved to almost like an artistic building method. They're using different colors of adobe mud and stuff like that. And here's a good little diagram of what an Earthship home kind of will look like today. And you can see the wind turbines, geothermal vents right here, water storage. You've got your piping out here to get your water recycled, all of that. So if you want to build an Earthship on your own, you may not spend a whole lot of money up front building, but the work is going to be really, really, really difficult. Building one yourself usually requires a team of volunteers that want to be a part of the process. It's going to take some time also, perhaps up to a few years, depending on how much time you're able to devote to it. If you're still keeping a full-time job and you're just working on your house when you get home at night and then on the weekends, it's probably going to take you a couple years. And then there's also the considerations for materials. If you want to do this yourself, you're going to have to collect and transport all of your materials yourself. And you're also going to have some sort of land where you're able to do this. So here is almost like a little case study of a couple that built their own Earthship by themselves. They were able to get their home constructed for under $10,000, and that includes the cost of the land and everything that they built on. They spent some time learning the principles and methods behind Earthships and then kind of built their own home based on that. They were able to complete it in under a year, and all of their windows, doors, and furniture were either found, acquired for free, or handmade by them themselves. And here are a few more pictures of their home. You can see this one is kind of goes back to like the original principles of the Earthship, which is just kind of living with less and making do, with what you have. Their home is I think it's maybe around 500 square feet. It's kind of like a little studio style home. You can see they've got their bedroom right here. There's like a small kitchenette over here. And then they've got a small little living space. And here's a good photo of some of their found windows. They've got this nice octagon window right here. So some of the advantages of the Earthships, these can be built really, really cheaply if you want to do it yourself. Most of them can operate entirely off of the grid, and they can provide a use for materials that would otherwise be thrown away. Especially useful in developing worlds or areas that have experienced a natural disaster. The Earthship Biotexture Company has actually done a couple of disaster relief projects. And these photos here are from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, following an earthquake in the early 2000s. Reynolds and his crew traveled out there to teach their building methods to the locals that were in need of shelter following the destruction of their city. And a lot of the rubble from the earthquake was reused as mortar mix to be able to build structures for these people to live in. And then these photos here are from the Andaman Islands that are off the coast of India following a tsunami that killed 3/4 of the people that lived there and destroyed their towns. A large issue that the islanders faced in rebuilding was that the wave had washed out all of their wells and filled them with salt water, rendering them useless. So Reynolds and his crew worked with local engineers to create different rainwater collection methods in these shelters for them. And they ended up being able to get these structures up very quickly because the entire community was involved in their building. They taught the adults how to earth ram tires and kind of had the adults working on that, and then sent off all the children from the village to collect plastic bottles and glass bottles and all that and bring them back, scraps of wood, all that. So they were able to get some structures up really quickly for a lot of people that really needed a place to live at the time. A couple of disadvantages. These can be really expensive if they're built by the Earthship Biotecture Company themselves. And like I said earlier, they're a very experimental building method. So, you know, a lot of the kinks still aren't worked out completely. So you kind of have to be okay with, you know, maybe not getting exactly what you're paying for. And they can take up to 2 to 3 years to find their internal temperature and self-regulate as intended. It's really, really difficult to get permits for this, if not impossible. Very difficult to insure. I think I read that there's only one company that will insure an Earthship home, and they're located in Taos, New Mexico. And these aren't suitable for all environments. When you look at the map of where Earthships are located, you don't really see any at all in the southeastern United States where we are, mostly for moisture issues. A lot of these are built in more hot and arid climates like Taos, New Mexico. Though, you know, some tropical places like Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and the Andaman Islands in India have been able to make it work there too. And it can take, you know, a couple years to build on your own if you're wanting to do this yourself. And here's another possible disadvantage. It's really kind of, you know, the jury's a little bit out on this one. It's mostly unknown as to whether or not tires leach toxic chemicals into the soil surrounding them, or more specifically, into your Earthship home. Even the EPA kind of admits that science really isn't all there, and they can't make a definitive statement as to whether or not tires in a home or tires used to build a home are going to off-gas into your home. Though it is believed that the rammed earth tires that are buried underground are a lot less likely to degrade because they won't be exposed to UV radiation from the sun. Because of this, some countries like Belgium, they prohibit the use of repurposed tires in construction for this reason. So Earthship Belgium uses earth bags instead, which are, you know, just bags filled with earth. Kind of the same thing. They're also strong enough to be load bearing and also don't require the building of a foundation. Earthship Biotecture claims that their homes don't experience off-gassing, but they don't really have a whole lot of science to back that claim up. And here are a few more photos of earth bag Earthships in the process of being built. So I would probably not pay to have an Earthship built for me by Earthship Biotecture. And in these two photos, you can see that the company has kind of moved a little bit more towards luxury in the modern day. You know, that's a full-size gas range right here. That's a huge refrigerator and a nice sink right there. Nice bathtub over here on the right. I don't really imagine that that was recycled. These new homes just kind of show that luxury is built into some of the Earthships. And they've kind of become like a novelty almost for people that have a lot of money to be able to move into. But I would build one myself, borrowing from a lot of different Earthship principles and practices. This photo on the left here is a Earthship that was built, I believe, in Victoria, Australia, by a couple who spent some time in the United States with the Earthship Biotecture Company, kind of learning their principles and their practices. And just the basics of an Earthship, and then took all of that knowledge home and built their own. Here are some of my sources. And that's about it. Does anybody have questions?
you have any idea what the countertop around that sink in the last photo was made of?
Hold on.
Yeah, right there.
It looks, the outside I know is definitely tile.
Right.
I don't know.
I like that. That looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, it might be concrete. I know concrete
Oh,
countertops are popular these days.
I do like that kitchen.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Say what you said again, Sam. You broke up there when you were trying to talk about that countertop.
It looks like it might be concrete. I was just saying that I know concrete countertops are kind of in these days.
Couple of questions from me. I don't know where that picture is.
Since I've turned this in.
What's that?
I said I've added some pictures since I turned this in.
You have?
Yeah.
Oh. There was one picture, yeah. Would it not be advantageous to turn all of these downward so that they don't hold water?
I would think so, yes.
And you said they done away with the can idea or the brick idea.
Yeah, the beer can brick kind of came and then went. I think they realized that they could have more freedom with shapes of structures if they kind of abandoned that idea. And then eventually they moved past the cans entirely and just opted more for glass bottles because they end up being prettier and they can catch some sunlight.
Yeah. So that the beer can brick, did they fill that with earth? Or was they empty?
From what I could find, they were mostly empty, though I think it would probably be a lot better if they were filled with earth.
Yeah, it seems like they'd give you more mass. As you were going through this, I just so happened to look down here and I seen these gloves, and at first I thought, man, they buried somebody in there. So they are creating their own septic system. Yeah, this is what I was. So this said botanical cells and solar septic system. Tell me about a solar septic system.
I think the purpose there is they use a lot of bacteria within the cell. I'm not totally sure where the solar comes into it with the septic system. But yeah, a lot of it's relying on like natural bacterias, filters, grease traps, stuff like that.
Okay. I got to correct you on one photo. You talked about being a pump. Unfortunately, it was not a pump. It was it's a tankless water heater.
Oh.
Yeah, I recognize that. I use that in my environmental systems project with Carla.
I don't see it now. You may have added that to it.
Yeah, I was trying to find pictures of those. There's not, they kind of try to stay out of the public eye with a lot of the like inner workings of it, I think, these days. So there's pictures of like the artistic, attributes of the house, but you can't find a whole lot of pictures of how everything works.
So in my endeavor throughout my architecture studies and green building studies, one of the biggest, it is probably the number one rule is no petroleum in the house. And tires are made of petroleum. Anything that has petroleum in it is going to off gas. And I know, like you say, there have been some legal aspects, fights on that. But in any architecture school, they will tell you, to get low VOC, do not put petroleum products inside the house, period.
Yeah, I think, when they first started building with tires was in the 70s. So I'm not sure that there was a whole lot of specific science and regulation about that at that time. And I think that they made it such an integral part of the Earthship building method that they're really, really unwilling to let go of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of claims that they make about how there's absolutely no off-gassing in an Earthship home. However, they don't have any science to back it up.
He won the election. He didn't have any, any claim to it, but he won the election.
Yeah.
So these look like they are like super laborious to build.
They are.
Ramming these tires, holy mackerel. I've seen in the past some videos of people, so they're working in the southwest where it's hot, it's kind of an arid desert-like area, and they are ramming these things. And I'm thinking, good Lord. I've busted wood in the summertime, and it ain't fun for sure. Did you come across anything when you was talking about legal issues?
Mhm.
Did you come across anything where Michael Reynolds was suing for the name Earthship? In the past, I've had students mention something about a trademark infringement where he has the trademark Earthship. Did you come across anything like that?
No, I was focusing mainly on the legal issues that he was having around building his Earthships. But I do know that the Earthship Biotexture Company doesn't particularly like it when other people build Earthships and call them Earthships. They want it to kind of just be something that they, have, like you said, have a trademark on.
Yeah. So the issues with the building inspection office, did you find out any specific issues? Obviously structure, but what about health issues? Well, you addressed the tires. What about sewage issues? I guess was that one of the concerns?
Yeah, sewage was a concern. They were also really concerned with no utility lines going there whatsoever. They were also concerned with roads. They didn't have any established roads. So yeah, a lot of people that moved out to those Earthship kind of subdivisions that they built after they were having all of those issues complained about not having roads to go to their house. Their water system didn't work exactly correctly. They had all of these complaints, but a lot of it was, I felt kind of unwarranted because you made the choice, you knew what you were getting into, and you made the choice to move out there and buy this home and everything. And you knew that there weren't roads, and you knew that there weren't any utility lines.
So you're saying that people had moved out there to build these Earthships were some of the people complaining?
No. So most of the people that moved out there kind of in this communal sense moved out there to build their own homes. They wanted to be a part of the process. They really were excited by what Mike Reynolds was doing. They wanted to be self-sufficient and they wanted to be sustainable. So they moved out there and were living on the property and building their own homes. Now, fast forward a little bit to where he's having the issues with the permits office. After that, after losing his architecture license and things like that, he kind of tries to continue building Earthships, but within the parameters that the building office has given him. So that's when the small subdivisions start to come together. And that's when, the Earthship Biotexture Company starts selling Earthship homes that are already made that you can move into. So some of the people that were excited by this idea moved out to these homes and really, knew what they were getting into. They're pretty adamant about how everything is still really experimental, and they say that a lot. So a lot of the people that moved out there were complaining about not having any roads and how they had to replace a bunch of tires and car parts and stuff on their cars because there weren't any roads to get out there. How they were having moisture issues, you know, stuff like that. So who didn't after the fact, I think weren't really like just down with the whole communal aspect of it.
I know, you know, the tire issue, you know, that's something that everybody has really, I'm gonna blow this up just a minute so you can. I like the idea of using the tires because tires take up just tons of acreage in landfills, really. And so, and what, we change them out every what, 3 to 5 years, depending on how far we drive or how often. I mean, you know, tires only last about what, 30 to 50,000 miles, somewhere in that neighborhood. And you got to have 4 of them on your car. And then when you look out there and you think about how many cars are going up and down the highway, it can, you know, where are all these tires going? So it's pretty crazy. Did he get his site to be a, you said he was trying to, but I'm assuming he still hasn't got it classified as a
No,
environmental, what was it? I forgot the
he
term.
wanted to have it sanctioned as a sustainable development testing site.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had that bill put together. He spent, you know, a couple years time working on that instead of working on Earthships. And then eventually the bill, he was hitting a lot of roadblocks getting it introduced, and then finally found somebody that was willing to help him introduce the bill. And then the bill was filibustered by state government.
Anybody got any questions for Sam? Any statements?
I was just wondering, Eric, I mean, I studied this a lot in the 80s when I was in school for architecture, so I'm familiar with a lot of it. I didn't keep up with it, but I'm just wondering with the tires and the off-gassing, isn't there a way to seal that off or have a vapor barrier to carry any possible off-gassing back outside if you design it correctly?
Oh, I'm sure of it. Yeah, I mean, you know, you can put barriers up there for sure.
Isn't there a slice diagram you can show? I was looking at that. One that shows like a cross section, you know, like a sketch, not a real photograph.
Was there one in her presentation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I thought there was a cross section at one point in the beginning. She had some, I thought there was.
Well, there may be.
I might be thinking of the Earthship.
Yeah, there's a couple diagrams of like actual Earthships in there. I don't know about cross sections of tire walls. I'm sure you could design it to kind of route the off gassing elsewhere. That kind of gets into equipment and materials that aren't exactly recycled, though.
Well, if you try, oh, that's it there. Yeah, that's the one she had in there, that I think. Yeah, I remember. I thought there was one.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now, does that show the tires? Oh, yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so the tires are really on the ends. Okay, that's not good then.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have to shield that and ventilate it back out or up.
Yeah, typically the tires are covered with like adobe mud or mortar or cement or something like that. And then if you want to get creative with it, you can paint it with non-latex paint or just cover it with adobe that's with natural dyes or whatever. But they're pretty close to the inside of your home.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. I think that looks like the one. No, that's more structural. But yeah. Yeah, you'd have to get, I mean, by the time you spend the money to pay an engineer to design all that, you've raised the cost to defeat the purpose of doing it in the first place, I guess.
Well, at $225 a square foot, you know, but then I really like this, you know, the story that you had in there about the couple that built theirs for about $10,000. You must have changed a lot of these because I can't find nothing. There it is right there.
Some pictures. I realized that I didn't have enough like visual aid of how the Earthship was built exactly.
Yeah.
I could talk about for a while, but I wanted to have more items on there.
So, you know, using recycled materials is a big thing in my book. Like I say, I've built a tiny house for almost nothing using pallets and recycled wood and stuff. I want to point you in this direction. If you got a moment, take a look at this particular video here. This was a competition that was established by Google many moons ago, and I was a part of when I was at Western Piedmont, where we built a, you know, we talked about the concept of using the plastic bottle as part of an insulator in a wall. So we built a wall and filled it full of plastic bottles that were sealed, that had a, you know, had a cap on it, and then used spray foam around them and created a wall that had about an R42 in it. So it would, you know, just using plastic bottles and stuff. So take a look at that. It's pretty cool. But you know, the bottle method has been around for years. You know, just stick it in the wall and make it look real pretty. The rammed earth shelter, or the rammed earth homes, they also use different colored bottles and so forth. So it's really cool.
One word of advice: if you use a lot of bottles, if you put the necks facing out and you're in a windy area, that building's going to make a lot of weird noise.
It's gonna sing, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah, so that one of the very first pictures on there where they had the necks of the bottles sticking out, when they first started to use those, I think they quickly realized that. And in a lot of the videos that I was watching later on, next slide. Yep, right there. I think they started to realize that that was an issue and started cutting the bottles in half and then kind of sticking them together. So you had two ends instead of, you know, an end and a neck.
It also just becomes homes for bugs.
Yeah.
Whether they're inside or out. If you've got openings in the wall, that's where bugs want to be.
Bird houses, bees, all kinds of things. Yeah. That's what I was thinking when I was looking at these cans here. You know, it's just, I don't know why that they would put the opening out.
Well, I think they
Aluminum cans don't have any structure. Wouldn't they have to fill it with something?
Well, I thought about that too, but I don't know.
They would crush.
Well, there weren't very many can structures after like the early 70s. So I assume they learned their lesson there pretty quickly.
Yeah, that R value right there just has to be minimal.
One thing I know.
Possible. Oh, go ahead.
No, you know, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention cans back then might have also used more aluminum than they do today, which might have made them sturdier. I don't know.
Well, you mean steel? That's what I was getting ready to say. So for you youngsters out there, this is what I used to drink out of. You know, this was an all steel can. They had this huge rim across it, and when you opened it, you had a tab that actually pulled off and you discarded. It was not part of the can. And you could take these cans and put them in a can opener and cut the tops and the bottoms out of them. We would tape those boogers together and make potato cannons out of it.
Oh, yeah.
If you try to do that with an aluminum can today, the can would probably explode.
Yeah, I don't think you could squash the old beer cans like you do the cheap aluminums today.
No, we used to take cans to the recycler. Just, it was kind of like, you collected bottles, you collected cans, and you couldn't step on these. Or we couldn't. We were young. We couldn't step on these and crush them. And that was one of the ways that we tested to see if they were steel or aluminum, because the aluminums we could step on and crush them, but the steel ones we had to hit it with a hammer, with a sledgehammer to crush them.
I still pull those old steel cans out of the river fully intact, but the aluminum cans end up crushed down into balls.
Yeah. If you come across any Coca-Cola cans that's not so rusty, you can't tell what they are, keep me in mind.
I mostly get Coors and Schlitz and yeah.
The beer drinkers, they didn't care. Here, throw it out there.
I got a lot of Coke bottles, but no Coke cans.
Yeah. The Coke cans, that's what I do collecting, and the cans, they didn't survive a lot.
I got barrels of pool tabs though, so if you pool tabs.
Yeah. They used to make belts out of those things, and keychains and all kinds of things.
It just amazes me that we quit using them decades ago, and I still pull a few out of the river every week.
Do you do it with a magnet or what?
No, they just wash up.
Oh, okay.